Excited to be here. Saturday, June the 17th. Tomorrow is our longest day of the year as we enter into summer solstice. And a new moon. So there's tons of incredible energy out there if you're affected by energy, which I think most of you listening are. And so you might need to just provide yourself with a little grace depending on what's going on. Again, some people during the new moon are affected and they'll have more energy during the new moon cycle. I get a bit more introverted and find that I need just a bit more rest, a bit more sleep. And if I'm going to be retreating into my bat cave, it seems to be around that particular new moon. And there's tons of planetary stuff going on. So much so that half of it, to be honest with you, I don't understand, but I'm just starting to learn different things. And but I'm always in awareness now of what's going on. So the message this morning for all of you is just grace. Give yourself some grace and check in to see if this is yours or does it belong to somebody else. So we've been working in around the information about the ego. We started with the Hoffman process, which I'm going to weave into the ego work, and what the guidance really about the ego is. We're not even in awareness of some of the programming and the conditioning that we have, right? That we've received. And so this last week, I was certifying the first time in a very, very long time in life coach certification. And part of what was being done was writing what's called a vision statement. And so you take you do an interview process, you take the words of the person you're interviewing and you create this vision statement. And the vision statement is designed to help with self-hypnosis, basically. And it was awesome just kind of watching the process, because even through this, I learned so much. Because one of the things that we do is a lot of us are externally motivated, meaning we're motivated by something outside of ourselves. And we are what's called move away from motivated, or have a move away from pattern of thinking and speaking. And it's knowing what we don't want, not moving towards. And it's as I was contemplating the feedback that it's a third-party certification. So the person who actually certifies everybody was providing some feedback. And it was so awesome for me to witness, because I was like, oh, I didn't see that. And so then I went back and looked over everything and just thought about even the way that I speak sometimes. I'm like, oh, I do that. And I am a move away from motivator. I'm motivated that way. I'm going to do kind of a side note here for a second. So side note, in marketing, your audience will either be move away from or move towards. Your audience will also be externally motivated or internally motivated. And it'll be whether it's 50-50 or not. I don't have any data on that. But when you're writing like sales letters, marketing materials, and you're doing it from a place of, yes, authenticity of self, but also keep in mind that the person reading, so if you're wanting to share thoughts, let's say via social media, and your desire is that people are motivated to connect with you, then you're going to need to keep in mind that you have an external motivator and or internal motivator, a carrot or stick motivator. And so your content will need to create both. Now, you could create both in one social media post if you want to, or you could create multiple posts saying something similar but speaking. So just think about that. If you have internal, external, and then carrot and stick, there's like a combination of many things that you could do there. And so that was just a side note that I wanted to talk about, because You do want to speak from a marketing perspective, you want to speak to where your audience is at that moment in time. Okay, so now go back to the ego. And so our because we have this conditioning, we aren't even aware of it, right? So our ego has an agenda, right? And the agenda might be trying to be right. It might be trying to control or pretend to know what's going on. It could be trying to be better than others. It could be trying to fix the past, trying to get to a good future or secure or safety in the future, or trying to justify what's going on in the present. Our ego can also try to make us small, right? So that we don't step out of the boundaries. It also can try to impress others. That's an external motivator, right? Try to be nice so that we receive praise or love from somebody else. Try to manipulate others in the way that we want. Trying to fix other people to feel good about yourself. Try to get help or sympathy or create drama by complaining, or trying to quiet the superego by getting it right and being perfect. And so if we just remember that our ego, like our ego, our id, our I, has an agenda. And so we can become more aware. Now, one of the greatest things, truthfully, about journaling, if you just journal random thoughts, like even if you just wrote down, like, what you wanted every day, or what you were concerned about every day, or what you were happy about every day, or what you were stressed about, like on a regular basis. You don't need like a 10,000 word entry. The benefit of starting to journal is you'll start to see the patterns of behavior and whether or not you're internally motivated or externally motivated, or if you're a carrot or stick motivator. And then you can start to reprogram, right? You can start to reprogram your mind and speak to your ego, so that, because we know it has an agenda, and our intention is not to get rid of the ego, because we do need the ego, but to have a conversation so that the divine, the self is, I don't like to use the word in control because that's not really what it's about, but is directing the ship, I guess is probably better. And the more advanced we become spiritually, the more, and I've said this before, the more insidious our ego becomes, right? Because it's tricky. It is really, really tricky. And so, and one of the ways it can do this is by corrupting or co-opting the positive feelings and insights that naturally arise. And so here's an example. Gratitude can easily slide into like an egoic high, gloating, or bragging. Joy can slide into insensitivity to other people's pain. Peace can slide into complacency and self-satisfaction. Love can become prideful. And so here's kind of some simple examples. And I'm just following a manual that I have, right? So that's why I'm looking down. So examples as things like saying something like, she sure likes to eat, which is a kind of implying that someone eats too much, right? I don't understand why she does that. So implying her behavior is abnormal or strange. Something like, what's going on with that, implying that there's a judgment around that, right? Are some examples. Examples of the ego needing to be right. Of course, I mean, this one's obvious. I think I told you so, right? Things like that. I can't stand to see him wasting his life like that. That's an egoic statement. That's what happens when one of the things that I thought that I say that I'm going to be more aware of where it's coming from is, well, there are consequences to your actions, right? Like so is that divine, or is that ego? So because that would be something that I would say, well, there's consequences to your actions, or there's consequences for that. Even an ego pretending to know by predicting the future, or mind reading. So I'm going to hate getting together with them. It's not going to be fun. Like things like that. That's ego, right? or the ego creating a sense of lack. This day isn't very interesting. I'll be happy when. I wish I had a more exciting life. Um, it's so cold today. I laughed at that one because it was like, I live in Canada. Like, I say that, often. And so when I was contemplating what they're saying, it was just again, it's not right or wrong. These aren't right or wrong statements. It's just like, be an awareness of who's speaking. Am I identifying with my ego, or is that coming from a place of what we refer to as like divine spirit? Is that love speaking? Is that Christ consciousness speaking? Would Christ consciousness comment about how cold it is? And again, it's not about I remember when I first started to read this, and I years ago, and I thought, well, what am I not supposed to say fucking anything? Like, I'm just supposed to sit here and smile. That's how I felt like. And it was like, no, it's not about that. It's just about being aware of who's driving the bus at the time. And reminding myself that there is this self-identification. And so there's a level of peace and joy and happiness that will come with um, with no attachment to the story, with not identifying with the story. We know that there will always be a level of self-identification, but at what level? And I would say this is especially important if we're having moments of unhappiness, or insert a word that resonates with you more, right? So if for me, there's a telltale sign for me. If I feel at peace and I have serenity, I know that I'm connected to Christ consciousness. If I have anything less than peace, and that could be joy, happiness, right? But if I have anything less than that, my ego's involved. There's some sort of self-identification, some sort of judgment that's happening, judgment of self, judgment of the situation, judgment of another person. There's a story that's attached to how I'm feeling, the way that I'm feeling. And again, it's not about feeling neutral, like feeling nothing, but rather being aware of, am I feeling empowered or disempowered? If I'm feeling disempowered, my ego's involved. Am I feeling love, peace, and joy? That's Christ consciousness. If I'm feeling less than that, my ego's involved. And when our ego's involved, we have thoughts. Thoughts only become a problem when our ego's involved. So there's no problems with thoughts if our ego isn't involved. And again, it's not to eradicate the ego, but just to be an awareness, right? If I'm unhappy, there's the other thing that happens. I think that the biggest blessing for me was when I'm unhappy, I'm in awareness of I'm unhappy, and then I can be aware of the story or the illusion, but I also can be aware of the limiting beliefs. Like, am I going into blame? Am I going into shame? Am I trying to create guilt? Am I being manipulative? Right? And so it's maybe the answer, though I wouldn't ask the question, why am I unhappy? But it would be the answer to why am I, and I'll just use the word unhappy or unfulfilled or whatever word that would be. And the opportunity we have, again, is not to judge the story or the illusion, but just to be in awareness that, that is totally an illusion that I'm living. And the other opportunity we have then is to kind of investigate the belief. Right? So an example would be, if I'm unhappy, or I'm experiencing a situation that I'm not happy with, and I'm unhappy because I'm not happy with that, I can look at the beliefs behind the experience, because there's a story and illusion. And so I think part of, I guess, the caution is, this isn't about Pollyanna. It's not about, it's not hot in here. Things aren't heavy in my life. It's not about ignoring or suppressing or repressing, but it's more about just having this opportunity of going, wow, like, I'm really heated, or I'm really triggered, or I'm really sad, or which to me would be a trigger. And exploring what's the story. What's the story I'm telling myself? And more than likely, um, the story will be externally motivated. This is for me personally, externally motivated, and will have a move away from belief around it, right? It's kind of like the carrot and stick motivator, an expectation that I have of somebody or somebody in my life to behave a certain way, an outcome to be an outcome a certain way, an attachment to the way that somebody's showing up, or an attachment to the outcome. And the opportunity then is to just be an awareness of, is that Christ consciousness? So that would be my word, or is that ego? And Christ consciousness is this ever-loving, supportive, internally motivated, right? Although it would be egoic words, internally motivated and carrot. Like, look at what can happen, the unfoldment of life, versus being cautious. And again, I think I find just the more personal work, the more spiritual development work I do, the more the thoughts, the ego is a little bit more insidious. So the tone of the voice in your head and of your own voice when speaking to others, and the language used, has a lot to do with whether a statement activates your ego or somebody else's. So it's true, when we hear tones, we are often triggered, and we're triggered because our ego is triggered. So the most obvious signs that your ego identified is emotional reactivity and negative feelings such as fear, anger, hurt, jealousy, envy, or hatred. When such feelings arise, you become your ego, even if only briefly. And the more you engage in thoughts that produced those feelings, the longer those feelings will last and the more powerful a hold they will have on you. The strength of your negative feelings is a measure of how strongly and possibly how long you've bought into a belief or story. Those feelings in turn convince you there's a reason to feel that way. Otherwise, why would you feel that intensely? The answer is you feel that way because you believe your thoughts, not because your thoughts are true. I'm going to say that again because that is a mic drop moment. The answer is you feel that way because you believe your thoughts, not because your thoughts are true. So if we're not feeling like stellar and we're in our, here's mine. If I'm not feeling fantastic or I'm not feeling at peace, then I have a story to it. My ego is involved. And my thoughts, I have thoughts around it, but my thoughts are not truth. My thoughts are thoughts. What's true for me is Christ consciousness, sacred love. That's the truth. And again, no judgment for any of us. We're human beings, and part of being a human being is it was this agreement to come to this planet and have all of these experiences. And we need our ego. People don't realize that their thoughts are what makes them feel the way they do, not the circumstances. So it's not the circumstances, it's your thoughts around the circumstances. The ego uses circumstances to create feelings by telling a story about those circumstances, and that story makes you feel bad. So if you believe for a moment as the thought, I'm going to be homeless, you would be terrified. These feelings of terror convince you that becoming homeless must be a real possibility, without realizing you feel alarmed because you believed that thought, not because the thought is true. The mind just makes things up. It does not have a crystal ball. Your mind just makes things up. It doesn't have a crystal ball. So it's really interesting for me is when we tap into Christ consciousness, when we tap into intuition, and I'm fascinated by this. I often hear And I share with people, when you're tapping into your intuition, when you're, using one of your 5 clairs, right? You will feel like you're just making shit up. You'll have no basis, no data to prove your thought. And it feels uncomfortable for people. But what is fucking hilarious is you have your ego, which is giving you a story, which is a thought, and the thought is making you feel the way that, not your circumstances. And your thought is just a story, and it's just making shit up. But we believe the ego, but we have less. We question more the intuition, and the process is the same. Isn't that fascinating? That whether you're tapping into your intuition or you're tapping into your ego, the process is the same. One will have you feel bad, and one will have you tap into Christ consciousness and you'll feel good. And using those words in terms of discernment and not in terms of judgment. Isn't that just the coolest thing? That we are, as a holistic being, we have both Christ consciousness and ego. The process is the same. The outcome feels different. And would it be so amazing if, as the more that we learn to tap into this Christ consciousness, the more the illusion falls away, and you see the illusion for what it is. And so, why we need ego? That's a great question, Sherry. So why we need ego is it is important at times in our life, I believe, to self-identify. I think we need ego to maybe even do things that we wouldn't like. We're scared to do. There's a story behind why we're scared, but it's like, no, it's okay that I stand out. It's okay that I have my own identity. It's okay that that I have an I am, right? And so we're not meant to eradicate the ego, right? It's a part of, we're a triune being. The ego is part of who we are as well. And the more you try to eradicate the ego, the more it actually will fight you on it, right? Because it's like the death of the ego. Like, ego is like, I don't want to die, right? And then there's this huge resistance that can be created. Okay, hang on for a minute.